Hi, this is Marina from Dark Star Astrology, and we are looking at the new moon for March, and it will be at 7 degrees Aries, and tomorrow is the start of the spring equinox as well. So this is really the first Aries, or the first new moon of the astrological year. The new moon falls in Aries Decan 1, and that means everything feels fresh, new, shiny and bouncy. It all looks very tempting, but Venus is retrograde, so to boldly retreat instead of to boldly go might be this new moon's motto, especially in relationships. Though some impulsive souls still could jump first and think later. This is why we could see many scandals, accidents and rash decisions in the news around this time. Decisions that could be regretted later on. So this moon then, it's on Aries and it will be conjunct Venus, the retrograde Venus, and it's on the fixed star Alpha Reticulum, which is in the star Measurer. So although the moon has no special dignity here, the gutsy stars do help this new moon do extremely well all the same. This period is great for the lone entrepreneur who works tactically. Here the moon does not lean on others emotionally and is not afraid of working solo. So those touched by this Aries new moon are also not moulded by what is popular or what loved ones expect of them. This is a time for activists and those who are willing to be heroes for their family or the greater tribe. In the wider world, there will be those who act quite ruthlessly in order to preserve the integrity and independence of their homelands. And don't we just know that? Now, this is interesting because we've had winter, and usually winter's supposed to be a time of hibernation. But it's been a very active winter, really. And now here we have the moon of new starts, the beginning of the astrological year. And with all this mention of activists, is it suddenly going to be that things spring into action where we do get protests? We can see some already with what's going on in Europe, because Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has started to get really belligerent, and obviously Turkey hasn't joined the EU, the European Union yet, but I don't know if he ever will now, because of his attitude. I mean, basically, he's telling Turks in Europe to begin a baby boom, not just 3 but 5 children, and staking a claim to this new motherland. So it's with everything that's going on in Europe, we've got this as well. And in one of his newspapers, they ran a cartoon of Angela Merkel dressed in a Nazi uniform with the headline Lady Hitler, even though she's the one that has basically been inviting in unlimited refugees. And these refugees are pretty much, 99% Muslims. So she's not exactly been shutting down borders. So I don't get this. It's all very confusing. But that's really the point, isn't it? It's all this divide and conquer going on. There's all this polarities going on. There's all allegiances that really don't make sense at all. And at the end of the day, you can kind of see the bigger picture. It's all about a civil war in Europe. I mean, that's really what they're doing. I mean, what does anybody expect when unelected officials in Europe are just deciding the future of working class natives in Europe? It's affecting them. Like I've said so many times, it doesn't affect those high up like Merkel or anybody who's really in the upper middle class realms, because they all live in their nice communities. They don't get affected by it. So, it's definitely Europe, and I will look at this in more of a dedicated post. I think it's just getting worrying, to say the least. So the moon is going to be conjunct Venus retrograde, and it looks like a mission and higher calling could be put before love in the early stages of this Venus retrograde. And you can see there's a tug of war going on already in a pact sign of Aries and against Jupiter, all on its own, trying to lay down the law. I mean, this is so much about religion. I mean, in the post I said, could this be the Abrahamic religions versus the so-called infidels? And Aries can actually represent the horned pagan god, which could also be Satan as well. You know, Satan with his horns. So it's funny. You know, the pagans, essentially, Europeans are pagans, and pagans are, we do worship the land. We do worship the seasons, and even astrology, I think, is, well, it is. It's a pagan religion. So having Jupiter opposing such a mass of planets in Aries, it does make me think of the whole populism thing, which I think is quite a good word to describe it. I'm glad people aren't using a worse word for it, because the rise of populism, I don't see that as being a bad thing. I mean, why is it seen as like, oh, populism, as if it doesn't sound, you know, it's not the rise of the right wing Nazis. It's populism, which is quite a benign word. So, and it is because it basically means the populace, the population at large. Yeah, so it is all lined up against this Jupiter. But when you see that Jupiter's also square Pluto, that is the bankers, that is the 2%. It is the global cabal, the elite, whatever you want to call them. But it is wealth. It's wealth for wealth and power. Because when you have Pluto and Jupiter connected like that, it is, and it's in a square. And you can see, it's kind of interesting as well, because there is a learning triangle in there, and the resolution is actually little Ceres at the bottom, and that is the land, and that is the peasants again. And you know, I'm proud to be a peasant. I think we all are. People who love their land and are patriotic in the best of senses, really, is because they love their land. They are the plants that grow in that land, so they are, what's the word? Sensitive to it. They are sensitive to the power of the land. They are connected to the land spirits. They are connected to, you know, the little fairies and the elves that the Celtic people believe in. You know, they are connected to the land, and the elementals. That's the word I was looking for. So we are connected to the elementals, and if you think of, if there's going to be endless populations from much prolific countries and much bigger countries than Europe coming in, eventually we're going to run out of space. We will. And what's going to happen to our beautiful countryside? What's going to happen to the nature? It'll just be built on. And with what Erdogan said, that touches a real nerve, because yes, our populations we're not breeding basically in Europe. And the reason for that is quite complex, but I do believe it's depression. It's hating yourself. And we're in retreat. Aries, the spring equinox, it's all about fertility. It's the fertility time. It's Easter. It's about having babies. So what I said earlier about a mission and higher calling being put before love, I mean, it could be that. It could be like we're in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, it's fight or flight, isn't it? Everything shuts down just so that you can fight. And you're not really into growth. You're not really into breeding. It's kind of unnerving that then you get Erdogan saying, don't have just 3 children, have 5. I mean, it really is a outbreeding, and that is a genocide. That is technically defined as a genocide. So that's what he's advocating. So I think he's a really dangerous guy, and I think we have to look at his chart as well. But I'm not going to do it in this full moon. new moon post, because really it should be about the new moon. But these are the themes that are coming up. So in our personal lives, with the new moon conjunct Venus, we expect luxury and abundance, and those touched by the new moon could actually get it. But with all this passivity, it leaves them wide open to being exploited and manipulated by the Svengalis of this world. And here we go again, Venus is quite passive, and it's also in retrograde as well. So some people are in retreat, but others are really pushing forward. And I think the pushing forward is really Jupiter, because it's got that square from Pluto. It's basically being propped up by something hidden. The deep state that's going on in the US, there's also, a deep state in the EU. I mean, the EU is the deep state, rather. So that's what's propping up this religious war, this spiritual war. But the spiritual war really is infidels against the Abrahamic religions. It really is. Christianity, God knows what that's doing. That's operating system one that hasn't worked. So they brought in, OS Erdogan or Turk or something. If you uncork Turkey, that is the front door into Europe, basically. And they all want to go to Germany. They all want to go to Germany and Sweden. They don't want to stay in the south of Europe. They actually don't. I saw the protests in Lesbos, which is an island in Greece that's closest to Turkey, one of the closest islands to Turkey, and they're just pointing to maps saying we're stuck here, and yeah, they that's not refugees. It's not refugees. Yeah, you're stuck there because you're supposed to go to the first place of safety. These aren't refugees as well. They're fighting age men. And then you have a few little families placed in front like the Trojan horse, just to soften our little hearts. But anyway, if you look at that chart, to me it's very symbolic of what is going on in Europe with Aries being so full. It kind of, I think what happens to Europeans in the month of Aries is that our DNA is kind of woken up because it's spring. It's like the sap has risen. Right, okay, we've been asleep for the last, how many months? 3 months. And we can see more and more that pressure's being put on, and we're going to rise up and really protest about this now, because it's ridiculous. And I've seen myself as well with some of the more new agey women that I used to follow about a couple of years ago. I see more and more of them all now actually supporting Trump, very tentatively, but they are, because what Trump has done, whatever he's done, whatever is his real motivations are, I really don't care. What he's done is emboldened people in Europe to actually stand up for themselves, because they actually have got a genuine reason to stand up for themselves now. And Trump has emboldened that. So I thank him for that. It needed to be done. Trump has kind of ignited the Viking spirit. He's ignited the pagan god. He's ignited the horned god. He's ignited Saturn. And you might say that's Satan. And that's not very Christian. We've got to turn the other cheek and, take our punishment and self-sacrifice for all the evil that we've done, us nasty Europeans. But no, it's no more self-sacrificing, no more putting ourselves on the cross and crucifying ourselves, because that's the end of that. We had that at Christmas. That was the death of the sun. But now the sun is coming again. It's rising. It's springtime. It's resurrection time. It's resurrection time for the pagan gods again. And this very this new moon, I like that chart. I like the way that it's opposite Jupiter. It's like, okay, you're outnumbered now, the demiurge or whatever you are. Now, one thing about this moon as well, the Aries moon conjunct Venus can attract violent behavior as it goes about trying to bring fairness to situations. And again, that's the Venus that doesn't want to upset anyone, or it's virtue signaling, basically. And that's really what Angela Merkel's doing, isn't it? So she's quite a good example of a kind of negative Venus, or even a Venus retrograde. So this moon is on fixed star Alpha Reticulum. It's not a massive star, but I just thought it was interesting because it is a scientific instrument that is used to measure star positions. So it's about stargazing. And this instrument is basically like a net, and it has a grid line of meridians in relation to each other. So it's kind of a net as well. So I think it brings scientific, astronomical and astrological skills to this new moon. A time to gaze at the night sky and ponder on the meaning of the universe and what is important in the greater scheme of things, and what parts do you play within this net. So as we've seen in the Venus retrograde post, Venus does have two sides. She's got the positive and the negative. So are you serving, on the negative side, are you serving your venereal urges, which is basically service to self, or are you working to illuminate others, which is service to others? I listened, I was so pleased to hear Sienna Leah, I think her name is, I listened to The Feminine Rising, Are You Serious? Part 1. It starts off being quite hippy-dippy if you're not into that kind of thing, but bear with it because they say some really good things about the female shadow, and the way they put it is they call it the bitch queen. They're being real about the state of the world, basically, finally, because we need it. We need to have that. We need to have female leaders in this and female guides, because more men are willing to be politically incorrect because they really don't care about being ostracized as much. But a woman who's exiled, when women really are sociable people, and we're very subject to peer pressure, whether you like it or not, there's very few of us who are willing to stick our necks out. And we do it tentatively. And I'm one of those people that do it tentatively as well. I think probably women who do step out of line are more likely to be those from the right. And that's kind of interesting as well, because I had I thought about this and I thought, oh my God, you know what? In England, we've had we're on to our second female leader here, and they're both from the Conservative Party. So there must be something about being a right-winger as a female that makes you braver. I don't know whether it's because you're more traditional, or whether you've got a supportive husband. I mean, I know Thatcher had that. I don't know. But it's interesting, isn't it, really? So, yeah, okay, Hillary didn't win in America, but Europe is pretty much ruled by women. I mean, look at Merkel, and you never know, we might even have Marine Le Pen for France as well. So Theresa May and Merkel, all run by women. So it is the return of the divine feminine in a very strange way. But the divine feminine is a Viking warrior queen. She's not this freaking bitch diva, everyone worship me, I'm a goddess, all this kind of very ego stuff, but ego in a negative way, because I don't think there's anything wrong with an ego either. Knowing who you are, the big I am, is really important. Once you know who you are, you can give to other people. With this new moon, it's about getting in touch with this Aries heroic archetype. Aries is supposed to be quite selfish because it's I am, but it is also the soldier. It is the one that will run out into the battlefield and be brave and be courageous and be on the front line, and will often will sacrifice themselves. And this is the weird thing, will end up maybe killing themselves for the good of the whole. And also because they want to be remembered, I suppose, that can be a selfish thing. It's like, I want to go down in history as the person who took the slings and arrows for my family so that my family could carry on. Because if I didn't, then they'd all be slaughtered, So there's this kind of selfish motive behind defending the family or the nation or whatever it is. That's the spirit of Aries. And you know what? I think I am going to look at the Aries Ingress chart. I might as well. It's tomorrow, and I don't think I'll get a chance to do a separate one. I think it will show most of the themes I've covered in this new moon anyway, and it absolutely does. Because yes, we've still got that stellium in Aries opposite Jupiter, and the Jupiter's still square the Pluto that's in the new moon. What is interesting though is basically the sun square Saturn with the moon as well. And they're both on Etemen, which is the eye of the dragon. So this kind of dragon eye, and also Acumen, which is the stinger of the scorpion. So those two together also happen to be on Trump's moon. And I think we should look at some of the research I did for this, because Nigel Farage has got his moon there as well. So no wonder they get on. What I wrote about this in my ebook is that the moon here makes it quite a treacherous labyrinth to navigate, one where you will have to be good at feeling your way through the dark a lot. What it really comes down to is being able to trust the universe enough to hope it takes you to where you need to be. In some ways, it can actually be an advantage not to be able to see the scary creatures dangling between the dimensions. So this zone carries two extremes. Some folk here can see too much and are driven mad by the true nature of reality. And Van Gogh had his moon here, while others find the unknown fascinating and enjoy the challenge, which was Shelley. The latter type will have very strong psychic shields. Another possibility is the habit of summoning up the monsters that no one wants to face. And I put Trump and Farage in that category. And that's also what the ascending sisters were talking about as well. These folk seem to have evilness projected onto them. Saturn ruling this decan can make these people addicted to a kind of I'll prove the public, which is the moon, wrong attitude. So it is a really heroic moon. This decan I nicknamed Disordering Crystals and Illuminating Shade. So this is also a decan that I associated with Asperger's and ADHD as well. And it also has a very strong divine masculine energy. So ironically, in all the Saturn darkness, this is the decan that produces the greatest light workers. These crystals are the spiritual warriors who, when feeling psychically strong, can influence enough minds to cause a massive uprising. So this dissing order doesn't mean that we have to fall into anarchy. Not with Saturn in Capricorn round the corner. The future of the human race is basically in their hands. Sadly, the responsibility can be too much to handle for some, so zoning out with the medicines of the snake venom can occur. Those challenged by Saturn in Sagittarius activating their sun, moon, ascendant or midheaven will be the ones mopping up the mess. And as I see, there are people who are being activated by the Saturn in Sagittarius on that degree. And for this, it's pretty amazing. For this Aries Ingress chart, it's on Trump's moon. The moon and Saturn are on Trump's moon, and it's square the sun. And if the sun, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because it just shows basically the challenges that certain leaders have to face with the deep state, and whether Saturn moon is the deep state or not. The moon Saturn is probably the demons the demonization of those who are trying not to sell their souls to the devil, but it's very hard for them not to, because, you know, the deep state is all pervasive. And if people are being spied on, you know, now that we found out about the whole Vault 7 stuff, and having information on every single person, you know, we're just being taped all the time. So it's naive to think we're not really. So yeah, the big brother watching you, you know, the eye of the dragon, the iPhone, the eye being spied on. So yeah, it's an interesting chart. Also, Venus and Mars are in mutual reception as well, which is nice because it basically means that the men and women have to help each other out here and stop fighting with each other, and stop dividing the family. We have to unite again and get back to nature and natural law. That's the only way, really, we can overcome the supernatural war that is being waged on us, really. Okay, I think that brings me to the end now. All the best. Bye-bye.